suppose.
You can cite me if you want.
Yes. I'll let you sponsor yourself. Do your own plug-in. Plug the merch. Merch.
Shrek stepped out of his shack into his swamp. His eyes adjusting to the light. The moon was full, but his hut was...
It's like as if, where would the mouth be if we were to speak into it? It would be on the bottom.
The moon was full, but his hut was insulated from its light. He'd long since boarded up his windows. Fiona had liked to look out the windows, so he boarded them up to erase the pain. Creeping through the fen, he followed the hoof prints until he came to the back of an equestrian. There was Donkey, head down in a patch of mushrooms. He's gained muscle in his hind legs, Shrek thought. In spite of himself, and his tail is ever so shapely. Shaking away the thoughts, he stepped forward to grab him. Just as his large, succulent green hands were about to nab the beast, it reared around. Shrek shouted in surprise as it was revealed to be a centaur. "What are you doing in my swamp?"
Swamp.
Tyron threw up placating hands. "Please, my good ogre, I'm merely searching for a stew." Shrek placed his large sausage fingers on the half-horse's mouth. "Say nothing more. I know who you are, Donkey." Trying to play a fast one on me, are ya? Tyron's tail whipped slightly. "As much as I'd like to, I'm currently looking for a demigod of the name Annabeth. It's been quite the chase." A thought crossed his mind, and he suddenly looked frustrated. "It may assure you, my good ogre, I'm not this donkey you speak of. A distant cousin, maybe, or half-cousin, but certainly not." Shrek put his finger on his own mouth. "Say no more. You're looking for a student, and I..." He paused to build up his courage. "And I am looking for love." Chian was visibly uncomfortable. Hives broke out among his sturdy calves. "I'm afraid I..." His large, incandescent, beautiful, lush, brave, warm brown eyes penetrated Chian's small, wise, equally brown eyes. Such huge, sturdy hands against Chian's small, elegant hands. "Shh. It's all ogre now, my love. It's all ogre now."
I was waiting for that.
Okay,
one.
this is probably the happiest moment of my life.
Like,
I read
there's
the
like
one
a
I
lot
did of
more.
Mr. Cole and Mr.
All right.
Davis.
No.
It's not messed up. I don't do any.
Oh,
yeah, I don't do any like smut or whatever it's called.
Oh, the lemons, the smut.
Is that what it's called? I don't know. I don't go into any actual.
You don't go into the actual.
No.
Yeah,
Because this is
it's
just
still funny.
Yeah,
It's still funny.
That's the purpose. It's meant to be funny.
iDubbbz. Wait, gotta read it.
iDubbbz, ex-Professor X. "What am I doing here?" Ian thought to himself as he opened the door of the large university. "I mean, yes, I'm a mutant, but I don't need schooling." Wolverine's gruff voice shook him from his thoughts. "What you doing here, boy?" The YouTuber thought of crackling a cancerous joke, but decided against it. "I'm looking for a professor. Guy in a wheelchair. Goes by X." His eyes darted back and forth. This Wolverine guy was looking tough. And iDubbbz didn't have mighty how to basic there to protect him. Wolverine grunted. "Professor? I know him." His bloodshot eyes narrowed in on iDubbbz. "But I don't know you." And feigned surprise at the statement. He put on his video face unconsciously. "You haven't? Does this ring a bell?" And upon saying this, he began his hollowed Reese's Puffs dance. His mutation slipped through, and the music began in the background, and he began the dance. Reese's Puffs, eat 'em up, eat. The music stopped. Ian's dance faltered, paralyzed mid-shaken. Wolverine just stared. What's the matter with you, bub? You some kind of queer? Logan slipped a cigarette into his mouth and began chewing. Ian thought of something real clever to say, then stopped. I have osteoporosis.
I have osteoporosis.
He blurted out weakly. Wolverine nodded solemnly. My wife had that. The moment was tense, and the two men bonded. After several seconds of staring into each other's eyes in a purely heterosexual manner, Wolverine broke contact. You want to see the professor? Follow me, licking his lips. The legendary YouTuber did as he said. Wolverine led him through a number of flights of stairs until they reached the revered headmaster's office. Grinning, Logan popped a cigarillo to his gnarly mouth and gestured for iDubbbz to enter. Go right in, bub. He'll want to see you. Nervous, the angsty boy pushed open the door and walked in. Xavier sat before him, bare brow shining in his repulsant glory. iDubbbz stared into his wise, crinkly blue eyes. Professor X stared in his likely brown eyes. Hello, Professor. I'm gay. I know. Come on in.
I'm gay. You gotta read it right too.
Ian nervously sat forward, Reese's Puffs blasting as he strolled. His mind couldn't help focusing on Xavier's wise, kind face and his sturdy, supple, old body. Xavier beckoned him to sit on a high-seated chair. Leaning forward the best he could, with a constitutional wink, he put his lemon-scented mouth next to Anne's swear, pickle musk-smelling neck. Can I let you in on a secret? There was a taut pause. iDubbbz nodded slowly. He would agree to that. He would agree to anything his new professor asked of him. Anything. I can read your thoughts, Ian gasped. And I, too, am gay.
Do they work as parodies?
Is there anything else?
Yeah, there's.
There's more. You just keep on scrolling down.
I feel like I
Scrolling
want Sage
down?
to read the very last one.
Yeah, then it'll hit, and
Mr.
then you
Davis
do
and
one
Mr.
more.
Cole.
Alright, I can read the very last one if you want.
You don't have to do it out loud because they still don't.
Mr. Krabs, ex Stalin.
What?
Stalin. Joseph Stalin. That's the joke.
Wait, that's like heavy capitalism.
That's the point. That's the joke.
Mr. Krabs stood before his innocent employees, his crabby face red with anger. His crab hands were on his hips, and he spat dollar bills between his teeth. You imbeciles! Don't you have any idea what you've done? SpongeBob and Squidward looked at each other sheepishly, then glued their eyes on the floor. There was a lot of awkward tension between the two. Mr. Krabs didn't know of their midnight tryst, but he knew something was going on. You, Mr. Krabs stuttered, steam coming from his ear holes like the steamed lobster. You lost the formula! This was heroed, causing the two employees to cower in fear. Do you have any idea the harm you've caused me? This is the Krusty Krab. There can't be a Krusty Krab without Krabby Patties. His crab hands were balled into fist. He wanted to damage them. Surprisingly, it was SpongeBob who spoke up. You know, Mr. Krabs, we could always just make a new recipe. All was silent. The customers ceased breathing and Squidward's heart stopped beating. A minute passed, and Mr. Krabs leapt on the sponge, pile driving him to the floor. Months later, here he was, burrowing out of Bikini Bottom prison, flanked by his new communist allies. With the bent spatula, he dug through the coral, and now he was free. A red badge on his muscular bicep and a copy of El Manifesto Comunista in his pocket. In where months he's gone from thriving capitalist to jailbreaking communist. But such was life. What a greedy crab I once was, he reflected to himself. Gunfire shook him from his reverie. He ducked underneath an ocean rock, his Marxist comrades following suit. Once it entered, he burst out from it, spatula in hand. He waved it wildly, deflecting the spray of bullets, and reached the firing guard. He buried his nearly broken spatula in the poor fish's neck, and took his gun. He fired a hole in the chain link fence and leapt through it. His comrades followed suit, and they were free. A year later, Eugene Krabs sat in the office of the glorious leader, Joseph Stalin. The great man looked Mr. Krabs directly in the eyes. A revolutionary crustacean stared into his hard flint eyes, nothing his sterling mustache and firm features. Joseph Stalin, in turn, noticed Mr. Krabs' lean, hard muscles and red, succulent flesh. The dictator started the meeting. My good Crab, it is good you could come. I am glad to hear you converted Bikini Bottoms into a communist state. You have earned my respect. His brief, simple words filled Mr. Krabs with more joy than any mixed-race literature could ever. His eyes watered, but he blinked away the tears. What I have done, I have only done for you, dear leader. The Soviet leader regarded his underling. He fiddled with a human skull on his desk for a few seconds, then began, Mr. Krabs, let me tell you something. The crab humanoid leaned forward eagerly. Amongst all the eager comrades in the Red Army, only you fully embody the firm salvage virtue I expect of my men. No Gopnik man could call himself more salvic than you. His stoic composure broke a little. His voice broke a little. I want you to know it means a lot to me. Joseph Stalin suddenly stood and ushered him out of his office. I expect you to come back next week, same time, 13 hours, no more or less, understand? He didn't wait for an answer. Good, come back every week. I want reports of your progress. You are dismissed, comrade. Mr. Krabs stoically stepped out of his office, grinning to himself. His cheeks were as the hammer and sickle flag. He had left capitalism and fallen in love with communism. Yeah. Now he had fallen in love with its leader. He giggled a little to himself and smiled, blushing. Back in his office, Joseph Stalin did the same.
Let me check if that thing's still recording.
What's this one?
I don't know if that one's as funny. That's probably my favorite.
It's recording.
It's like everything I find funny. Doing communism.
Sherlock X Smog.
This is the worst.
Sherlock trailed behind the overeager dwarves, tracing his fingers on the mountainside. This new land is very different from London, he thought to himself in a sterling manner. Yet it is so very similar. He did this, distracted himself by analyzing his surroundings, to let him forget about his lost lover, Moriarty. He shoved the thought away and caught up with a little person. They stood exponentially, their small arms crossed. As he caught up, one of them, Wally something, issued forth a greeting, but Sherlock ignored it. He was only here because of his former best friend's brother couldn't handle the best Smog by himself. Incompetent lout, he thought in his usual acidic manner. They wound around the mountain for a few more days. It was night, and the dwarves were panicking. They babbled something about midnight and prophecy and other such drivel, but Sherlock promptly solved it in his usual manner. The obvious solution is to blast a hole in it. The dwarves twiddled with their beards distractedly not falling. Oh, don't tell me none of you knuckleheads brought a stick of dynamite. Blank stares greeted this. Oh, this is rich. You Middle Earthers have fireworks and magic and enchanted rings, but you don't use explosives for other obvious purpose. He let out an extended groan, and little friends looked at the ground in bemusement and shame. Sighing, the great detective shoveled through his pack until he found one. Give me a second, he commanded. He put it up to the mountainside. He took out a lighter and lit it. Stepping back, he watched it do its magic. Sing passed in a blue, a crack formed in the slab rock. The dwarf stood in stupor. 3 seconds passed and Sherlock couldn't hold himself back. Hit asked it with your picks, you blithering buffoons. The reserve snapped and they burst into action. The bigger one started heading out the crack. Sherlock stood back and watched. An hour later was enough of the tunnel to shove Sherlock through. Once in, he had to navigate. Creepingly, he descended, conscious of sound. A small pistol was in his gloved fist. After minutes of scuttling, he came face to face with the dragon. It simply stared at him with its malevolent amber eyes. Oh, he was stunned. He accepted its size, but not its molten golden eyes and shapely teeth. Greetings, dragon. I am no dwarf or elf. I have not come from here. He tried to convey complete confidence. It rumbled a deep-throated chuckle. I know that you are no elfling or dwarfling. I could not tell which mortal race you were. Your scent was unfamiliar to me. Thus you were an Isarti, or a being from another world. Wizards are cowardly and would not consent to the likes of me, so you had to be a human from elsewhere. Sherlock was impressed. I must say, bravo, your deduction is entirely correct, and wholly clever. The monk looked quite at ease, so he was inspired to press on. You know, you greatly remind me of an acquaintance of mine, Moriarty. The great worm rumbled again. I can tell this Moriarty was no mere friend, or foe. A lover, perhaps? The hero of the Reckenbach stood speechless. Why, yes, he was my lover. Felt good, felt wholesome to say out loud. Smog brooded for a second. Have you moved on? Sherlock barked a short, bitter laugh. Most definitely not. Smog extended a talon, tentatively resting on his shoulder. I know how you feel. I once had an impossible lover. His name was Bilbo Baggins, also known as John. Sherlock gasped at this revelation. I was told you ate him. His voice shaking, Smog confessed, no. That blasted company of Thor and Oakenshield killed him for siding with me. Sherlock put an elegant hand on the talon. It seems we understand each other, and that we both have a void in our hearts. For the first time in years, the great dragon smiled. Yes, we do, lover.
We're just gonna keep reading them all. That one's also terrible, but I think it's less cancerous.
Read the title.
Milan X title Trump.
Milan X. Donald Trump. Her hands sweated as she sat before the European.
How many of these are there?
Like 8 or 7 or
Her first thought of him was that he was eccentric. He wore a black robe with a red sash, and his body was powdered with oranges.
Are you glad?
She heard nothing but ill of him, from the Emperor and Shang, but his hands were rather mighty, and Shang's negative opinion didn't bother her too much. As a single mother, she had more important concerns than her lout of an ex-husband. So, word on the Silk Road is that your emperor wants to build a wall.
Word on the Silk Road.
That was the original Chinese highway.
I know.
His voice was clever, and his squinty eyes appraised her. Oddly enough, she felt like an open scroll before his odd,
Thank you. What did you do?
hear that for so long.
Okay. Before this odd foreigner, Milan nodded, nervous, too taut to elicit words. Her calloused fingers tapped a rhythm on his imported mahogany desk. He smiled a little. Well, then it's your lucky day. I happen to be somewhat of an expert when it comes to walls. His voice was crisp, yet warm, and Milan inwardly fell at home. He stood suddenly and offered his large, juicy hand. Why don't you show me the land you want it built on? Milan froze for a moment, heart in throat. She didn't want to dishonor her ancestors, but his hand was thick and supple, and so, disregarding traditional, she took his large, all-enveloping hand like an over-eager 2-pound puppy and led him there. Oh, let him lead her there. They passed through rice field after rice field with few words exchanged. At one point, he laid down the upper half of his robe so she could pass through a puddle without wetting her shoes. Milan blushed and accepted this offer. She may have been born a peasant, but she still appreciated gentlemanly manners. As they passed the peasants toiling in their fields, the topic somehow turned to their relationships. She confessed her failed marriage after a brief hesitation, and he in turn told her of his disastrous affair with an Eastern European wench named Melania. He explained how she left him after someone else, Maturani, or something like that, became the president of a mercantile guild he was part of. Unconsciously, they began walking closer together. After a few minutes, they both realized this, but neither vouched to change it, and before she knew it, she was in love with this wily European. After an hour walking together, they reached the imperial city. He saw the ruins of the emperor's torn-down Great Wall. Together, they vowed to rebuild that wall, and tear down a wall of a different sort. The end.
It's been so long since I've looked at these. It's been a long time.
Pericles?
Yeah.
Trump
It's
X
ancient
Pericles.
Greek statesman.
Pericles listens close as Apollo laid out his suggestion in his ear. Once the golden-haired god finished, Pericles nodded, then stared into his narrow blue eyes. So you're saying me wake Athens great again? Oh, so you're saying we make Athens great again? The wing-shod god nodded. He waited a second, then started fully with his deep, assertive voice. I'm saying we make Athens great again. The mighty god, standing tall at 6'2", rested on his shovel-like hands on Percy's shoulder. Listen to me. I'm telling you how to do it. I have a great plan. The best plan. It's a beautiful plan. In fact, far better than Socrates' plan. With every word, his droppy lips drew closer to Percy's ear. The Greek statesman found himself nodding with every word, every syllable. What we do is, we build a navy. That's it. We build the biggest navy this world has ever seen. Percy stood suddenly. He put his hand on his heart and bowed his head in reverence. My Lord Apollo, it's brilliant. Yes, we wanted a navy. It's genius. Yes, this'll do very well. I'll add a 10-cubit statue of you on my Parthenon. Nay, 15, nay, 20. Apollo smiled, his eyes becoming pure slits. It's been a pleasure doing business with you, Pericles. Though I do have to confess, I'm not Apollo. I'm Donald J. Trump. I'm the leader of the great nation America, and I have come to help you guide Athens to its destiny. Pericles stood spellbound, lips sealed in amazement. The great golfer slipped his business card into the great statesman's tunic. He pressed his beautifully crinkly lips to his ear and whispered, "Call me." Donald Trump then slipped into his TARDIS and left.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's Pericles. You're saying like Perseus or whatever.
Oh.
It's Pericles.
No, because the next one is Mr. Davis and Mr. Cole.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
you
the
can
one
do
I'm
it.
supposed to read.
Well, I mean, the girl I did this all for, like, she's in my intro of
Okay.
history, so.
My name is
So
phone.
she was also learning about
Still recording.
Pericles. No, I have to disappear this time.
mentally. Like, I'm gonna have to have. Good thing I have counsel on next week. Because I'm going to need it. Come on.
The fanfiction
It's
parodies
okay.
work.
It's
admit it.
okay.
Have you been enjoying this so far?
Yes.
It's the only funny thing I have on my log.
Alright,
but
alright.
It's funny.
Funny. This is pure, like,
Me-
this is anti-humor.
This is my sense of humor manifest.
He had this on his YouTube channel.
Mr. Davis versus Mr. Cole.
Gotta say
Mr.
the X.
X Mr. Cole. Very, very important detail. Mr. Davis stepped into the classroom. Thick fog curled all around. Eric batted away the fog, securing a route for vision. A strip of gazelle lied on the floor. It was raw and freshly blooded, with humanoid teeth marks in it. A
I'm
cold,
going to show Mr. Davis this, but I haven't done it yet.
a cold bead of sweat broke out on the bearded fellow's face. In panic, he cupped his hands and shouted, "Reginald!" The mighty hound appeared just as Mr. Davis was about to bolt from the classroom. Eric leapt out of the corner he crawled into, scooping his beloved dog in his arm. His mighty hound licked the tears from his face, and Laura fed him sustenance. Once the hamburger helper was down his gullet, he rose, wiping it off his hairy mouth. "I'm ready, Laura. Reginald, wait for my cue. When I say go into a mild voice, you leave this room. Understand?" He wiped the sweat from his brow, spreading the cheesy foodstuff all over his forehead. A little tripped into his mouth, and he felt emboldened to progress. Eric Davis sprinted through the fog. He swung his hands and feet, toppling desks and chairs in his mad fury. He raged until his furor was spent and collapsed onto the tile floor. His head was damp, and he couldn't breathe. His bearded slumped down, and he cried. Mr. Cole then slithered out from the mist. "Hello there, Mr. Davis. How are you doing?" A forked tongue slipped out of Mr. Cole's mouth. Eric looked up and gasped in horror at the creature his former colleague had become. His bald head was riddled with scars, and it extended from a serpentine neck, which came from a lion's body. Oh, that sounds familiar. "Oh my gosh, you're a sphinx!" Mr. Davis was terrified, but his natural mildness masked that. The abomination laughed a deep, awkward laugh. "Yes, I am. And you would know all about sphinxes, wouldn't you?" After Eric stared blankly into his stretchy brown eyes, he awkwardly explained, "I mean, you teach ancient world history, don't you?" Mr. David nodded mindlessly. "Yeah." Rusty Cole gathered strength, then put a seductive paw on Eric's shoulder. "How about you and I make some ancient history ourselves?" Check with the screen for a minute. Mr. Davis nodded slightly and said in a small voice, "Yes, just let me go tell Laura." He awkwardly gathered his things and left Mr. Cole's room. I'm gonna think of this next time I see him.
Exactly.
Rusty sat on his desk, twiddling his thumbs until he returned. Eric slid into the room, more hamburger helper on his face. She says she's cool with it. A massive smile broke out on Mr. Cole's face. Then let's start this relationship in a responsible manner by taking a walk in the park instead of practicing risky behavior. He said this last bit like he was reciting it from a health class textbook. Mr. Davis nodded, already putting a leash on Reginald, who identified with Mr. Cole and did not bite his face off. Before we begin, I gotta ask. Mr. Cole cocked his head, ready for this question. Ready for anything. Are you into feet? Just to clarify things, Mr. Davis hates feet.
I know.
Guys, come on, guys, keep it down.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Cole said nothing for 5 minutes. They stared into each other's eyes. Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. The bearded teacher broke into tears of joy. He put his bristly mouth to the bald one's ears and murmured, "So do I, my love. So do I."
Is that the end?
Yeah,
That's all of it.
that's,
No, that's the end. That's the end of it. Are you gonna end the recording? Unless you'd like discuss it or whatever.
There's like nothing. Yeah, like
well,
that's the funny.
some words from the author.
Well,
What was your inspiration?
Yes.
It started because when I went on Wattpad, I saw a bunch of crappy fan fiction. That was the most of it, and also the girl I wrote for also made some fan fictions of her own, and they were pretty terrible, and she acknowledged it. So I decided to make a fan fiction parody, and a lot of fan fiction parodies were like Percy x Annabeth or whatever. So I decided to make a really outlandish one, which ended up being Shrek x Chiron. And so I made that, and it was very funny. And at some point, the girl I wrote it for, she saw it, and she started seeing my stuff on Wattpad, so I just kept making the fan fiction parodies. And then I made the last one, and it was hilarious.
I have a question for the writer.
Yes.
This is the 42nd reader of this book. I would like to know, what books are you going to write in this series, I would say, that would continue?
More fan fiction parodies?
Yes.
More installments?
More installments.
I haven't thought about that. Okay, the last one I did, I think that might have even been first semester. It's been a while. But I kind of figured I'd end on a hey note. But I don't know.
Have you ever thought of doing Cthulhu X Hades?
No, I don't really do much with Cthulhu, so I prefer to do stuff I'm familiar with.
You're just kind of done with this feeling, or you might.
If you,
Nicolas Cage.
nah, I don't know. I kind of wanted to.
He didn't take. You don't take requests.
I kind of.
Hillary X Trump.
No,
No.
That's terrible. That's dangerous. The ones I went with, I kind of went with it with, I don't know, a predetermined idea of how it could be funny, at least to my own personal senses. So, I don't know. Some of them weren't that great, let's see, what was that one? Donald Trump X Pericles. One thing you have to know a decent amount about Pericles. But that was also because of the context of who I was writing it for. But yeah, what else?
I can't think of anything. You want to just end this?
Yeah.